The Sphinx of Egypt is one of the most famous ancient sculptures in the world. But how much do you really know about it? In fact, how much does anybody really know about it? There's far more to the Sphinx than most people imagine. You probably won't even realize how much about it you don't know until you've finished watching this video. Let's start with the theory that several people have posited, but nobody's ever been able to prove. The idea that there's a secret door or tunnel beneath the Sphinx leading to underground chambers. This is a theory of the historian Matt Simpson, who believes that there are tunnels beneath the Sphinx that connect it to the pyramids of Giza. Simpson is positive that a French archaeological excavation located the secret doorway during a dig in 1837, and that the incident was witnessed by the Egyptologist Colonel Howard Weiss, but that both the team and Weiss were somehow compelled to keep the discovery secret. Simpson's theory seemed outlandish, until the discovery of secret tunnels beneath the Giza Plateau in 2019. If there are tunnels down there, they must lead somewhere. A connection between the pyramids and the Sphinx makes a degree of sense if we're to assume that the internal cavities of the Sphinx had a purpose. But the question of why the French archaeologists and the colonel would be ordered to keep their discovery secret remains unresolved. It'd surely be a historically significant find, so why keep it quiet? Here's a less controversial statement about the Sphinx. It was carved from a single piece of rock. The sculpture seems too enormous for that to be true, and yet it is. This colossal monument was carved from a single piece of limestone, which was chipped away at by presumably hundreds of workers until we were left with the 240-foot-long, 66-foot-tall shape we recognize today. Actually, that's not quite true. The present-day Sphinx has been repaired and partially restored with limestone blocks, so its original shape would have been very slightly different. An art or construction project on this scale would be a monumental undertaking for any building or design company today. So the idea of the ancient Egyptians going about their work with nothing more sophisticated than basic hand tools all those years ago is nothing short of staggering. We don't even know the name of the designer who oversaw the process, as unlike many other large sculptures and structures in Egypt, the Sphinx doesn't carry any inscriptions to identify the people who made it. It's no wonder that some people believe it was made by aliens. We're back into controversial territory again with our next statement. The Sphinx might actually have been intended to be a representation of Anubis, the dog-faced god. Conventional archaeological and historical theory says the original face of the Sphinx was that of the pharaoh Khafre. But there are plenty of people who disagree with that assessment. One school of thought is that it may have been a lion designed to represent the star sign Leo, but lions didn't have any special status in ancient Egyptian culture. Dogs, on the other hand, did, and that was thanks to Anubis. Look again at the shape of the Sphinx with its flat back and the position of its legs. Does it remind you of a dog? Another point to consider is that Anubis was believed to be the guardian of the necropolis. If, as some believe, Giza Plateau is or was a necropolis, it makes all the sense in the world to have an enormous sculpture of Anubis looking over it. Could the face of the Sphinx have been altered in such a significant way since it was first made? It's possible. We've mentioned that there's no inscription on the Sphinx already, so it seems only right to ask who built it. If we disregard the Anubis theory and say it's a representation of King Khafre, it must have been built between 2558 and 2532 BCE. There's no solid proof of that, though, and there's no universal agreement on who built it, why they built it, and what its originally intended purpose was. That's a disturbing lack of information about one of the world's largest sculptures and the oldest known monumental sculpture in Egypt. We don't even know what its original name was, as it bizarrely doesn't appear in any of the literature of the Old Egyptian Kingdom. We know that it was called Horemakhet during the New Kingdom era, but that's not thought to have been its first name. It wasn't first called the Sphinx until about 2,000 years ago. The fact that there's no record of the building of the Sphinx, nor the naming of the artifact from a civilization that kept such meticulous records of everything, is suspicious, and makes us wonder whether records have been destroyed. If so, why? Here's a question that hides in plain sight. What happened to the nose of the Sphinx? The most popular version of events is that the armies of the French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte broke the sculpture's nose during a military battle near Giza during the French invasion of Europe in 1798. In fact, that version of events appears in some history books. The problem with it is there's no direct evidence for it, no witness testimony, and very little chance that it actually happened in the way the history books describe it. In fact, all the evidence points in another direction. According to the Arabian historian al-Makrizi, the nose of the Sphinx has been missing since at least the 15th century, and perhaps since long before then. Al-Makrizi claims that a Fatimid sheikh called Muhammad Sayyam el-Dar was responsible for the destruction of the nose, but there's no definitive proof of that either. The most controversial theory is that the nose was deliberately broken by Europeans upon their arrival in Europe to disguise the fact that the original nose had a classically African appearance and would have proved that the ancient Egyptians were black. Let's follow this a little further. Another idea is that the nose of the Sphinx was washed away by water erosion, but therein lies another problem. There's increasing evidence that through analyzing the effect of water erosion on the Sphinx, we can prove that it's even older than we already believe it to be. According to the geologist Robert Schoch, the erosion that can be seen on the sides of the Sphinx could only have occurred over a period of thousands of years and necessitates regular rainfall. There hasn't been regular and constant rainfall in this part of Egypt for more than 7,000 years. And Schoch's assessment of the erosion damage is that an age of around 12,000 years is more likely. That's unthinkable and would turn everything we think we know about Egyptian history on its head if it could be proven. In the interest of balance, we should point out that many of Schoch's peers disagree vehemently with him and dismiss him as a fringe theorist. Still, the fact that there's water erosion damage visible on the Sphinx at all leads to some awkward questions that mainstream theories can't yet answer. One of the oddest things about the Sphinx is that it wasn't visible to the naked eye in the 18th century, which is yet another reason why the theory about Napoleon breaking its nose can't have been true. He wouldn't have even been able to see it. Until 1798, the Sphinx was completely buried under the Egyptian sand. It was only when the top of its head became visible after the sand shifted that anybody knew it was there at all.